Hello everyone, Chiranjeevi this side. Welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to see what a compiler is, what an interpreter is, and how are they different from each other. So, these are the topics which we are going to discuss in this video. So, overview of how programming works. I have made an entire video on just this topic. So, I'll be giving link to this video in the top right corner. So, please check it out if you haven't already. And we are going to see what syntax is, we are going to see what a compiler is, what an interpreter is, and the process is slightly different in case of Java, and there is something called bytecode, and we are also going to see what that is. So these are the topics which we are going to discuss in this video. So make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video. So let's dive in. Let's see how programming works from the time you have written some code. So let's assume you have written code in some language, any language, and after that we pass it to some kind of translator. This entire video is on this translator, how do they work, and this translator's job is to convert code whatever you have written into something called machine level code. This machine level code is fed to operating system or OS. This operating system job is to execute this machine level code line by line to finish execution. So basically this is what happens when you write some code and you pass it to some translator, and that translator's job is to convert code into machine level code so that machine level code is understandable to operating system, and this operating system job is to execute those machine level code instructions to finish the complete execution. So this is what happens in programming in a nutshell. So now let's see what syntax is. So basically syntax is nothing but a set of rules which defines if your code is following structure of that particular language. So a syntax is nothing but a set of rules. So basically every programming language has its own structure. No two programming languages look similar, but actually there will be small differences in any programming language. So there is some structure specific to each programming language, and syntax is something that evaluates your code if it's following that structure or not. So for example, let's take a normal language like English. In English we have alphabets and symbols. Okay, so we have alphabets and symbols. So let's say even if we have alphabets and symbols, let's say if I write something like LBLA, it doesn't make any sense. If I keep a question mark here, it doesn't make any sense. Although these all LBLA alphabets are part of English, and question mark is also part of English alphabet symbols, and if we combine them like this, it doesn't make any sense. If we rearrange them, B A L L question mark, this makes some sense. This is how English structure is defined. So basically this is something which is following the English syntax, and this is something which is not following English syntax. So this is nothing but what syntax is. Just like how we have alphabets, we have something called keywords in programming language and some symbols. These are what defines a programming language. These are equivalent to alphabets and symbols in normal languages. So even if we write any combination of these keywords and symbols, it may not be correct because it's not following a particular structure of that programming language, just like how this is not following. And if we arrange them correctly, then it makes some sense. So the correct arrangement of these keywords and symbols is what syntax is basically mean. So now that we know what syntax is, let's scroll up a little bit and see. Here we have a translator which is converting the code we have written in a programming language into a machine level code. And we have two types of translators generally. One is compiler, other one is interpreter. Let's start with, let's see what basically both of them are doing. Both of them does the same thing, converting the code into machine level code. Both of them does the same thing, but the difference between them is how they do that. So compiler does it in one way and interpreter does it in one way. So that's the difference on how they do that, but both do the same thing. Let's see what compiler does. So compiler, you have written let's say this is your code. You have 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5 lines of code, and you pass it to compiler, and it gives the equivalent machine level code to all 5 lines, and this is passed to OS executes. So basically whatever code you have written in a file, while compiling, all the lines are converted into machine level code at a time, and each line is executed by OS. And now let's see what interpreter does. What interpreter does. So you have again 1 2 3 4 5, and you have interpreter. And now what happens is, what interpreter does is, it takes the first line and converts it into machine level code for line 1, and then it takes second line and converts into machine level code line 2. Like that, it will take each one of them separately and converts each one of them separately. So as you can see, and all of these are given to OS, and OS executes. So as you can see that both of them are converting code into machine level code, but what compiler is doing is, it's taking all the lines of code that you have written at a time and converting it to machine level code at a time. And here interpreter is taking one line at a time, only one line at a time. It's taking one line, converting it into machine level code. It's taking the second line, converting it to machine level code. Third line, fourth line, fifth line. Only one line at a time. So basically that's what difference between a compiler and an interpreter. So the immediate question should be, what's the role of syntax here? So in case of both compiler and interpreter, at the point of translation, in case of compiler checks syntax at all lines at once. It checks for the correct syntax at all lines at once. If even one line fails the syntax check, it doesn't translate whole code. So basically, in case of compiler checks the syntax at all lines at once, and even if any one line fails the syntax check, then it doesn't convert the any line to the machine level code because it does every line at once. So in case of interpreter, as it's taking one line at a time, it checks syntax also, checks syntax one line at a time. So if that particular line passes syntax, then it will convert it into machine level code, and if it goes to second line and it checks for second line as well, and if it passes, then only it goes to the machine level code, and it comes to the third line, and if it passes, then only it converts it into the machine level code. If at any line it fails, it stops execution from that point only. So let's say in case of compiler, if uh, third line has some syntax problem, we are not following particular syntax of that programming language. So in case of compiler, the compiler doesn't take any of these lines, because even at if there is a problem at one line, it doesn't convert any lines. But in case of interpreter, if there is a problem at third line, this first line passes and converts, it gets executed, and the second line also passes and gets executed. But the lines which are after or from the third line, they won't be translated into machine level code and they are not executed. So this is the basic difference between compiler and interpreter. Let's see an example for what we have discussed before. So this is a C code. Ignore these lines and these lines. What we need to see is just these two printf lines. So basically what printf does in C programming language is it prints something to console, and we can see that here. So in C, every line has to end with a semicolon. As you can see, this line is ending with semicolon and this line is ending with semicolon. But I intentionally removed semicolon at this line, so which makes it as syntax error. So ideally what should happen is this program should give an error. So let's see, let's run this, and so as you can see that it's saying expected semicolon after expression, this after printf world it's expecting a semicolon. This is an error. As you can see, there is no output anything here. It didn't print hello because this line number 5 has error. That's why it didn't execute any of these lines, because C is a compiled language, it uses compiler. So a compiler compiles everything into machine level code only if there is no syntax error at any point of line. Even if the syntax error is at line 5, it didn't print line 4, so it didn't convert any of these lines into machine level code. So in case of Python, see, we are having three lines here. First line is printing hello, second line is doing nothing, it's just print, and third line is printing world. So as I said earlier, print is a keyword in Python programming language, but if it's not used properly according to the rules, it's going to give us error. So the first line should print hello, the third line should print world. But since there is an error at line 2, since the Python is an interpreted language, even though it gives error at line 2, whatever there is at line 1, it's going to print it. That's why we are seeing here hello. We are not seeing world because it's below line 2, which is the error line. So whatever there is in error line and whatever below it, it's not going to print it. It's not going to execute them. Whatever above the error line is going to execute them normally itself. So this is an example to demonstrate the difference between a compiler and an interpreter. Some examples to compile languages which use compilers are C, C++, Go. So these languages use compilers. So some examples programming languages which use common interpreter are Python, JavaScript. So these programming languages use interpreter. As you can see, there is no Java in these examples because Java works a little bit different. So let's see how it works differently. When it comes to Java, Java uses both compiler and interpreter. Yes, it uses both. Let's see how. There is this Java code that you have written. So what happens is this Java code is first goes to compiler, and this compiler converts this Java code into something called bytecode. Bytecode, and this bytecode is then passed to interpreter. And interpreter works how it works in case of Python or JavaScript. It just it just converts each line by line, one line at a time of bytecode into machine level code. And this machine level code, obviously, as we know, is passed to OS, and OS executes. So this is what it happens under the hood in case of Java. So why it's converting something into bytecode in between is a different video altogether. Let me know if you want to see a video on this. So this bytecode is not readable to humans. It's just some gibberish that we can't understand as humans. So that's what it happens. So that's why Java uses both compiler and interpreter. And bytecode is nothing but is an intermediate code which is compiled from Java code and which is interpreted to machine level code. So this is how Java works. Do let me know if you want to see a video on bytecode. That video will include machine dependency, machine independency, topics like that. So it would make more sense to explain bytecode more in that video. So do let me know, and please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you.